Good afternoon. It's Thursday, the 29th of June 2017, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson. We're delighted to be joined by Patrick Henningsen today on live video Skype link. So welcome to Patrick. Syria, Mike.
We'll just get straight into it. Now, of course, a couple of days ago, we pointed out that the White House had released a press release saying that Syria was going to be preparing for another chemical weapons attack. Well, James Mattis then, on his way to the NATO defence ministers meeting, which is taking place in Brussels today, he made some comments about this. He said, well, let's see what he said. It appears they took the warning seriously. They didn't do it. There has been, or sorry, he said there had been no such attack. Patrick, this is an incredible turnaround.
What is he commenting exactly on there? That's the question. Is he saying there had been no such attack? Is he talking about the Khan Shaykhun alleged sarin attacks back at the beginning of April, the one where the U.S. responded by firing 59 cruise missiles into Syria, hitting Sharat Air Force Base? Of course, only 23 of those landed. That's another story. But is he referring to that, or is he talking about also foreshadowing that there will be no attack in the future? So they've telegraphed his position. This is the weird. Has anyone ever seen this before in history, where the United States telegraphed an event ahead of time and apportioned blame ahead of time before it's actually happened? I don't know what's going on here, Mike and Brian, but it seems like they're either trying to back out of a position right now somehow by creating a smokescreen of confusion, or it's very difficult to tell.
So Mattis went on to discuss other things. He said, we deconflict with the Russians. It's a very active deconfliction line. It's on several levels, from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and the Secretary of State with their counterparts in Moscow, Gerasimov and Lavrov. And he said, so we just refuse to get drawn into a fight there in the Syria civil war. We try to end that one through diplomatic engagement. So this is a quite incredible statement, and I'm not sure what, again, is behind this, because there seems to be, Patrick, quite a lot of effort being put in place to prevent Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin from getting together and perhaps maybe even liking each other.
What's frightening about this statement is the last time we heard conciliatory remarks from Washington or making some sort of sensible, sane diplomatic sense was back in March, when we had consecutive statements from the newly appointed Secretary of State Rex Tillerson and UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, where they said that the business of democracy in Syria should be left up to the Syrian people, and that maybe Bashar al-Assad can stay. And immediately after that, we saw the fake chemical weapons attack in Idlib, or the hoax, this fake sarin attack, which never happened. And then the Tomahawk cruise missile retaliation. So is this just a bluff by the United States? Are they merely trying to get the parties around them to lower their guard for another sort of repeat of what happened in April? Or are we looking at genuine diplomacy? Trump had early on had signaled that he was going to defer all major decisions militarily to his generals or to the Pentagon. And so he really took that whole group of issues and policies and decision-making ability away from the executive branch and into the Pentagon. Is this Trump reasserting himself? Is this the White House or the State Department moving in to try to take more control over affairs than previously it seems to have been 100% in the hands of the Pentagon? That's the question.
That is a good question. Now, in parallel with Mattis's comments, the Ministry for Foreign Affairs in Russia released a statement. This is a comment by the Information and Press Department on the White House Press Secretary's statement about Syrian authorities' alleged preparations for a chemical attack. And they said, we consider that these new insinuations on the issue of weapons of mass destruction in the traditions of the 2003 NATO intervention in Iraq to be nothing less than an invitation for terrorists, extremists and our opposition in Syria to fabricate another mass provocation using chemical weapons. After that provocation, the inevitable punishment for Bashar Assad should follow, as envisioned by Washington. So the Russians themselves, Patrick, not making it clear that they're not going to fall for any such gag. And so the question is, do you think Mattis's comments were related to that statement?
I don't know, but it's a pretty good guess that it is. Look, there's a line of communication, it seems, between the White House and Moscow now, maybe a more sincere line of communication that wasn't there in the past. So, I think the possibility is that the White House, finally the United States, whoever's in power now in the United States, or whoever's partly making decisions, has possibly realized that the last 8 years of Obama policies of backing a sort of jihadist proxy war in Syria, and then trying to back Kurdish forces and allow other parties to mop up the pieces to that conflict. That might not be a good policy. Maybe there could be a genuine pivot here away from what's really 8 years or 10 years really in total of failed policy in the Middle East with regards to Syria. So it's very possible that's what we could be looking at, a little shift, not to mention that Russia is now much closer to Turkey, Turkey being a major NATO component. And now Russian-Turkish relations are pretty much at an all-time high compared to where they were before the Russian jet was shot down in the fall of 2015.
Right. Okay. So Sergei Lavrov was also commenting to TASS this time, and he said, "I expect that this time the United States will take into account the need to actually ensure the non-proliferation of chemical weapons and will refrain from speculating on some intelligence data that is so secret no one may see it in order to provoke others and create pretexts for new attacks on the Syrian government forces fighting terrorists." He said that any US provocation against the Syrian army would be met with what he called a dignified and proportionate reaction by Russia. Russia really calling out the United States here and almost making the same types of allegations you might expect to see on this program, Patrick.
Yes, yeah. Then there's a number of reasons for this. It's pretty clear now that some of the games that have been played by Washington, but not just by Washington, but by also the UK, by France, who've been going along with the gag for the most part. And now the facts are coming out. Seymour Hersh's story was a major game changer. We covered that a couple of days ago, where it's revealed from his sources, which I said his credibility is quite high as a journalist, that the White House had full knowledge that the Assad regime did not bomb the people of Idlib with sarin munitions in April. So, but they had knowledge of it, yet they proceeded with the retaliatory strike by Washington. And so this means that really when the facts are coming out, the whole facade that's been created about the evil Bashar al-Assad and the use of chemical weapons and so forth, as it did with Iraq, the facade is crumbling with Syria now. So basically that means that Washington has to basically re-engineer all of its positions, which it had previously stacked against Russia and Syria.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's come across to Britain's aircraft carrier. I know there's been some dialogue on the fact that the Queen Elizabeth is now at sea, but interesting comment here in the Mail that Russia has been warning that Britain's new Big Lizzie aircraft carrier is nothing more than a huge target. And this is an interesting little article, Mike, because this is the reality of the situation. Aircraft carriers can project power, but they have to be defended. And of course, in the past, Britain's Royal Navy was able to carry out that role itself in-house. It could provide the surface escorts, it could provide the anti-submarine protection, and it could defend these aircraft carriers against surface-to-surface missile attack. But we're now in a very different situation because, of course, we haven't got those assets to defend these carriers. We've heard comment on this before. We've heard the Type 45 destroyers, world-beating class destroyers, but engine problems, can't operate in warm water, just in an incredible state of affairs. So we've now got the aircraft carrier at sea. And Michael Fallon, who I know you've commented has been back in the press here, he says, "I think the Russians will look at this ship, Queen Elizabeth, with a little bit of envy." This is a schoolboy talking. I've added a bit for him. I am ignoring the fact that we have no aircraft for our aircraft carrier or fully trained flight crew or the necessary escorts to operate in warm waters all maritime patrol aircraft, which is part of integrated anti-submarine warfare defence. We don't have, or will shortly not have, Harpoon anti-ship missiles. We won't have helicopter-launched air-to-surface missiles, and we don't have a fully operational nuclear submarine fleet, also a key part of defending the aircraft carriers to allow them to project the air cover. So we've got this man Fallon. I don't know what he is, Mike. We know he's a specialist in children's nurseries, so he's very good with small children and making profit out of nurseries. But when it comes to what he knows about defence, I think you've had him with a dunce's cap on. I haven't yet seen that image. I shall look forward to it. But what is coming out of this man's mouth? Just complete nonsense. So we better add a bit more. So let's bring him back on screen. The Conservative Party 2017 election manifesto said that the UK had one of the biggest defence budgets in Europe, and it pledged to maintain the overall size of the military, including an army that's capable of fielding a war-fighting division. And the Tories are saying, and therefore that's Mr. Fallon saying, we shall expand our reach around the world. So we're talking about a war-fighting division, and we're going to expand the reach of the British military around the world. What is this man actually talking about? Well, let's have a look by visiting part of the British Army's website. Here we are. And we've got the 1st United Kingdom Division. This all sounds exciting. This is powerful stuff. And then we'll have a look at the detail here. And it says the headquarters of the 1st UK Division heads up the British Army's light role adaptable force, optimised for the challenges of today, both at home and abroad, with approximately 14,000 regulars. 14,000. That's all there is. And this is the projection that Mr. Fallon is talking about. Now, they're backed up by 11,000 Army Reserve soldiers. No disrespect to the Army Reserve, but we've got to remember that essentially these are keen part-time soldiers. So the British Army, to project itself worldwide, according to Mr. Fallon, can call on 14,000 men. And the division is configured to deliver light roll excellence. Now, that's not some form of McDonald's hamburger. Light roll excellence, what do you think that means in terms of real combat?
No heavy armaments?
Well, we don't know what it means. Sorry, I led you into that one. We don't know what it means because basically it's indicating that this isn't full-blown heavy military division for war fighting. This is some light role force. So lies and lies again by the Conservatives as they continue to cut Britain's armed forces. So this is some comment from a US general. He said that he told a British military conference, this was actually to RUSI, the Royal United Services Institute in the US, that significant size land forces are needed for governments to reach their goals. The UK should not make further cuts to its military budgets because its army is already too small. So we're talking about 80,000 men and women overall, and we can just scrape up 14,000 men in one light roll division. This is outrageous, Mike. And the general went on to say this: bombs and bullets from the sky may be the first shots fired in a war, but most of the time the last shot is fired coming out of an infantryman's rifle, which I think is a pretty true statement. So if people wonder why the armed force has been cut to the bone, this was to equalise military force levels across the European Union to ease the creation of a unified EU military force. And of course, we know that this process is still going on despite Brexit. So Mr. Fallon talking on a world stage as if Britain was still fielding major military power, but we can barely scrape together 14,000 men to operate in one theatre.
Yes.
It's outrageous.
Well, today, as we mentioned at the start of the programme, is the Defence Ministers meeting of NATO taking part in Brussels. And Jens Stoltenberg this morning gave a little bit of a talk. We'll come on to that in a second. But let's just have a look at what's on the agenda. So there's going to be a bilateral meeting with the United States Secretary of Defense. The Nuclear Planning Group are going to meet. There's going to be a meeting of the North Atlantic Council, and that's going to be followed up by a meeting of the North Atlantic Council with the Resolute Support Operational Partner Nations. So that's broader NATO. But Patrick, this is the bit that really grabbed my attention. There are going to be several media background briefings during the course of today. One on NATO Ukraine, one on the Western Balkans, one on NATO EU relations. And what it said in relation to these meetings was that it was open to all accredited journalists, but that there were to be no photos, no audio, and no video recordings. And I've got to ask the question, what kind of organisation puts those types of limitations on journalists? It doesn't seem very accountable.
A paranoid organization probably does. So this is not something you'd expect from a democratic institution, definitely not open, definitely not accountable. So they want all the journalists there, but you have to take handwritten notes to keep up with the statements. I guess you got to be able to write shorthand. So very strange. So this seems to me like an organization that's got massive PR issues. So they're having to manage, they're juggling a lot of PR things at the moment.
So Stoltenberg, as I say, made some comments this morning. He said today NATO defence ministers will meet and they will address a wide range of issues from the mission in Afghanistan to full spectrum deterrence, from fighting terrorism to cyber defence. Last month, NATO's heads of state and government took decisions to increase our role in the fight against terrorism and to improve burden sharing in our alliance. We're making progress in both. By the way, burden sharing means money. So this is going back to the threat that Donald Trump made, the sort of protection racket type threat where he was complaining that NATO member states were not contributing their fair share. In fact, some of them were in arrears, which is they're going to send the debt collectors round apparently. And he went on to say that on burden sharing, that he is glad to say that they expect that this will be the third consecutive year of accelerating defence spending across European allies and Canada, with 4.3% real increase in defence spending. So I thought we'd just have a look at some of the things that they intend to spend it on, because they released a nice little video. So they plan to upgrade satellite and computer technology to adapt to new threats. They're going to, because these days conflicts are increasingly fought online as well as in the air, on land and at sea. And of course, we were making fun of Michael Fallon yesterday for suggesting that perhaps somebody who was attacking the West through some kind of cyber attack could end up being bombed in their bedroom, was the implication of what he was saying. I think the way NATO has put it is slightly different. I don't think Fallon was quite capable of grasping the nuances of what NATO's statement or position was. But they said that they are going to be spending 3 billion euros. And Patrick, I find this interesting that they're discussing euros and not dollars here.
Yeah, so spending 3 billion euros. Well, I think what's more interesting is that what is the money going to be spent on exactly? We already know that the DoD, we know probably NATO too, already employ people who are out doing sort of perception management on social media. In other words, trolling in order to somehow make NATO seem better or to defeat people in arguments in comment threads across the internet where articles and statements appear. So, will that side of things get expanded too? The information warfare side, I am guessing that yes, a significant component of this budget will be used for trolling, basically. Yeah. In the same way the NSA and I think GCHQ in the past it's been leaked via Snowden, via The Guardian as well, other sources that this actual practice takes place from governments. I think NATO is probably going to allocate money and resources towards that as well.
Well, that's quite possible. But one thing that they're certainly saying they're going to spend it on is refreshing NATO's cyber defenses, boosting resilience against cyber threats. So this is exactly what we discussed, you and I, Patrick, yesterday, and they're pushing that online. Now let's move on to your most recent comment there, because Amber Rudd then yesterday was meeting the Five Eyes leaders, because they are determined to remove terrorists from the online space. So this is, the intelligence network between various countries, including Australia and New Zealand. Actually, Australia has been one of the countries that has been pushing hardest for there to be censorship on the internet, along with the United Kingdom. The Five Eyes countries are joining Britain, they say, in a call to remove terror content online. And what they've done is release an open letter to the tech companies. So let's have a look and see what they had to say on that. They say, we as members of the Five Eyes stand united in our commitment to reduce the threat posed by online terrorism and violent extremism. We're determined to ensure the tools developed to enhance prosperity and freedom are not exploited by those who seek to use violence to divide us. There should be no safe space for terrorists and violent extremists to communicate online to advance their unlawful goals. It went on to say this initiative is also an opportunity to unify efforts to better understand how content and platforms are used to mobilize individuals to violence. With greater collaboration on learning about the harms, we can support more focused and effective countermeasures, be they led by civil society, the private sector, or government. However, we must move fast, and we look forward to quickly making a significant impact in diminishing the presence and reach of terrorists and violent extremists online. So this is talking about exactly what you've just mentioned, Patrick. They're going to be spending more time on the internet. They're going to be looking at behaviors on the internet. They're perhaps going to be employing trolls on the internet to see how people react when their buttons are pushed in a particular way. And they're going to use that, they say, to support more focused and effective countermeasures. But what's also interesting in this statement is that they're saying that whether these are led by civil society, the private sector, or government. So increasingly, Patrick, we're looking at the situation where the civil society, private sector, government, all stuck together in a big mass, working together to deal with these fake issues effectively.
Well, this is a good question. So the Five Eyes intelligence conglomerate, or the Six Eyes, or the Nine Eyes, as in the James Bond film. So what, if the intelligence agencies are getting together, if they're working covertly, then it's not done in public. Quite a bit falls under the Official Secrets Act in this country, and probably in every other country too. So is this a democratic, is this done by treaty? What is the legality of this Five Eyes, of this Nine Eyes cooperation structure that we're talking about here? Are they accountable in public? What do we have to do to see what they're doing? Or can we ever see what they're doing? That's the first thing. And the second thing is, it's known that the intelligence services will be subcontracting, in other words, outsourcing quite a lot of their functions to private contract companies, okay? Some of those might be in the United States. Some of them might be in other countries. Who knows which countries they're going to be in, but they're going to outsource a lot of their work, especially their so-called IT work, which is, and also maybe their trolling as well, and surveillance and perception management, okay? So, but where have they been for the last 6 years when jihadist groups, not just ISIS, but before ISIS, have been openly recruiting, posting violent material, basically attracting young extremists to go and fight in places like Syria for the last 6 years? They have had full run of the field, and with very little anyone stopping them. Okay, so that's been allowed to go on Twitter, on Facebook, even fundraising. Okay, and even members of the White Helmets calling for violent extremism on Facebook, on their pages. These are White Helmets funded by the British Foreign Office over the last few years. We've reported on that, and Vanessa Beeley has reported on that at 21st Century Wire. You can go ahead and Google White Helmets extremists on Facebook. Okay, so where have they been? But then
Patrick, they're not going to shut themselves down, because the Five Eyes are behind this lot, aren't they?
You could make that argument that the White Helmets fall under the state because they're funded by the state. So will they be? They're not going to be surveilled or stopped or that sort of extremism of the members of the White Helmets who are Al-Nusra Front, Al-Qaeda and Syria members. They're not going to be restrained by the Five Eyes. That's for certain, okay? And so what they want to do, I think what the state conglomerate here, the Five or Six Eyes, want to do is to extend the remit of this beyond what they call terrorism today into any kind of extremist behavior, extremist rhetoric, and who knows where that will end. It's a totally open remit. There's very little that's going to restrain them from extending this to political speech, for instance. Okay, so I think this is a very slippery slope. In fact, we're off the slope already, actually.
Yep, absolutely. Well, let's just look at what Amber Rudd had to say. The issue of terrorism transcends borders, and a truly global effort is needed to end the spread of hateful propaganda. The commitment from my fellow Five Eyes members to a shared approach to communication service providers and their backing of the New Industry Forum is a vital step forward. In our darkest hours, the international community has stood together. The ties between our countries give us a strong foundation to end the spread of the poisonous propaganda used to recruit and radicalize people around the world. Today's letter is a statement of our country's will, that our countries will never let terrorists win. Brian, this is all about internationalism, breaking down borders, building a global intelligence network.
I'm convinced that's what's going on. It's very 1984-ish if you have a look at it, because we now don't know what is peace and what's war. That's become blurred. We've got this ongoing violence in a number of countries. 1 minute it's described as civil war, which is part of your report earlier, where the Americans, of course, refer to civil war in Syria, but the next minute it's terrorism. Is that warfare or is it terrorism? And now, as Patrick's pointed out, you're bringing all of these agencies together. Who are they spying on more and more? They're spying on the public. And we've no separation of powers in this country. Who is spying on us? Is it MI5? Is it GCHQ? Is it the police under prevent strategy? We have no idea. All we know is that we are to believe the reports of terrorism. We're to believe the reports of violence and people wanting to kill us in our beds. They can't catch the terrorists. They can't stop the wars, but they can get in this more and more dangerous surveillance on the British public. I agree, Patrick. I'm going to come back to you on this one and say that we're off the slippery slope now, because we don't have a fully functioning government, but behind closed doors, these people, whoever they are, Privy Council or the inner circle of the cabinet, are simply deciding what the next stage of surveillance is.
Indeed. Now, let's move on then to Project Veritas, Patrick. Well, they seem to have caught CNN out.
They have. So this is one of a few videos that was released this week. As people who have followed the 2016 election between Trump and Clinton would have known, Project Veritas did a fair bit of damage to the Democratic Party inner circle and the Clinton campaign from some of the videos that they released, which exposed a lot of sort of dubious things going on in the back rooms of Washington with lobbyists and also with the abortion debate as well. So here is them going in with their notorious hidden camera and catching a CNN producer, I think this Mr. Bonifield here in Atlanta, and CNN says he's just a medical producer, but he's actually a news producer. So he has been involved in a number of major stories over the years. And he asked them about supposedly off the record, but it was on the record in this case, what do you think about the Russia Gate thing? And Bonifield's response, of course, is, well, it's not really happening. We're getting great ratings. It's all about the ratings. So really just saying what an illusion or what fake news the whole Russia Gate thing is. That's been going on since really the election cycle. So this is an incredible video.
Yeah, and it goes on, but honestly, you think the whole Russia stuff is just BS. And John Bonifield says, could be BS. I mean, it's mostly BS right now, like we don't have any big giant proof. And he said, I just feel like they don't really have it, but they want to keep digging. And then he went on to say, and so I think the president is probably right to say, like, look, you're witch hunting me. So it's a pretty incredible video, and people should watch it. But how do you think this all fits in with what has happened? What we were talking about with CNN yesterday or the day before, sacking 3 of their staff?
Yeah, they did. I don't know if you have that story to hand, Mike, or are we going to that afterwards?
No, we don't have that, but just talk about it.
Okay, well, the other day we said CNN had said that three of their reporters had resigned because of a fake Russia story that CNN then retracted. That itself is amazing that CNN actually retracted a story. But they said that they resigned. We find out that they were actually fired. They paid out their contracts. They were asked to leave immediately. That means basically you're terminated. So they had to fire these three reporters. And I made the comment on this show couple of days ago or yesterday, I can't remember which day it was, but he said that this is probably because of a lawsuit. Maybe a libel suit was threatened because I've never seen a network react that quickly. And sure enough, Anthony Scaramucci, advisor to the Trump administration, frequent contributor to Fox News, and also a contributor to CNN as well, got an expensive Manhattan lawyer on the case, and a $100 million libel suit was basically placed on the table there. And the CEO of CNN, Jeff Zucker, who a lot of people are speculating might actually could have been out of a job. There's a merger going on between Time Warner and AT&T. This is huge media merger going on. The talks are going on right now. CNN's a major component of that Time Warner media empire. And so would this CEO, Jeff Zucker, who's been steering all this anti-Russian coverage really for the last year, is he going to be out of a job? Well, with a $100 million libel judgment against CNN, certainly that's going to make them think twice about how they're covering anything to do with Russia. So this is going to change media coverage in the United States on Russia. Now, it's not a free-for-all like it has been for the last year. And now they're going to have to pull back and restrain themselves instead of releasing fake news story upon fake news story, as the Washington Post has done, the New York Times has been involved in, and CNN has really been leading in the sort of production of fake news, especially with anything regarding Russia, in order to tarnish the White House, to defame anybody associated with Donald Trump, and just generally to demonize Vladimir Putin in Russia globally anyway. So this is a huge game changer.
Absolutely. Okay, well, look, let's move on to Grenfell Towers. And the situation does not improve, Brian, because what they're saying now is that the final death toll is going to take months to produce. They're saying it'll be many months, certainly not this year. We're many months from being able to provide the number of people who accurately represents the loss of life at Grenfell Tower. That was according to Detective Fiona McCormick. She said, we believe, and they're still saying this, we believe around 80 people to be dead or sadly missing, and I must presume that they are dead. Now, The Guardian quoted Sajid Jamal Vatan, who's a resident and has compiled a list which suggests, according to The Guardian, that the figure could be well above 120. Apparently the police are saying that they have so far managed to speak to survivors from 106 of the 129 flats in the building, that no one has been traced from the remaining 23 flats in the building. But what they don't say, and they still aren't saying, is how many people they have identified from those 106 flats. So we still don't know how many survivors there actually are. Now, there is a spreadsheet doing the rounds at the moment, which implies that the number of confirmed dead so far is actually 88. But so far they have only managed to identify the status of about 300 of the 600 or 650 people that were in those flats at the time of the fire. So, Brian, you know, I'm
You're
almost
lost for
speechless
words.
at how the government is taking this position and still actually getting away with it.
I find this particularly vile, is the word I'm going to use, because what is going on here is that the government is making political capital over suppressing and manipulating the figures around people who've died in this tower block. What eyewitnesses have said is that, in their opinion, they should know, they live in the block, that hundreds of people have died. The overall occupancy of the tower suggests that. So it was obvious from the start that we were talking about extremely high casualties. We had the report that came in before the BBC was mentioning sensible figures, they were still at 17. We had the report that the emergency services had found some 50 people in the first of the hallways that they entered. That was 50 straight away. And what are they doing? They're suppressing the overall figures in order to protect themselves, and they're making political capital out of it. And two people I haven't forgotten are the two fire ministers. So Eric Pickles was informed. What did he do? Nothing. And we had the other gentleman went on to become policing minister. Name escapes me at the moment. But there were four MPs who were all individually informed of the fire risk. Are their names being debated in Parliament? Are they being called forward in Parliament to ask questions? No, what we're doing is suppressing the figures so that this fire can be kicked into the long grass with yet another judicial inquiry on the basis that we should accept a judge as being fair and independent. Where have we seen this before? Child abuse inquiry. We can't trust these people. The aim of the game is to suppress these figures. What would have happened in the Second World War? A building gets bombed, and then the government says, well, of course, there was only 17 people. The relatives know full well who would have been killed, and why were people allowed to be dispersed afterwards? So if you look at the procedures, nothing that is common sense has been followed over this incident. What's the government trying to do? Protect itself because they knew of the fire risk.
Absolutely. Sorry, Patrick, yes?
Brian made a really good point about political capital there. Although the Conservative government is in power now and sort of took the brunt of Grenfell Towers as it happened, there's political capital that Labour is also harvesting off of Grenfell as well. And I didn't see anyone from the Labour Party at Prime Minister's Question Time yesterday stand up and ask what is the true death toll of the Grenfell Tower disaster. And as time goes by, and you have to remember, if there is a general election in the fall, in October or November, given enough time, I'm sure the Conservative spin doctors can make a case that New Labour or the Labour Party itself has an equal responsibility in the conditions that have created the fraud and the corruption that led to the Grenfell Tower disaster. So both parties would like to suppress this, I think, in the long run. In the short term, it might have seemed like the Tories were benefiting from keeping the death count down, of course, but in the long term, I think both parties benefit from a cover-up.
Well, this is a good point, Brian, because of course the corruption and the disgraceful behaviour of the tenant management organisation and the local council with regard to people in need is cross-party.
Absolutely, and of course we can have a look at the social engineering in detail with New Labour. We've already mentioned New Deal for Communities. This is part of this false regeneration programme that was running a few years ago. But where did all that programme come from? It came from New Labour operating in the key inner London boroughs, Hackney and Islington, etc. So social engineering on a major and vicious scale, where local people were to be suppressed as really idiots who didn't have a valid viewpoint. So when those local people said there's a fire risk, the arrogance in the local council said, well, go away, we know what's best for you.
Yep.
All three parties are to blame.
Patrick, just 1 minute on this, if we could, please, because time's short. This is the Mail saying Roy, as judge once accused of helping social cleansing the poor, is picked to run the Grenfell Tower public inquiry into the tragedy that killed at least 80.
Well, it looks like this is the right man for the job. Look at past inquiries and look at who they put in charge of various inquiries in the past. And it always seems to be some sort of a divisive character like this, or somebody who's got vested interests in an area that really they shouldn't have if they're going to be overseeing these sort of legal proceedings. So this is an interesting development. I'm hoping that the residents of West London are going to assert themselves into the inquiry process. That's one thing that we absolutely hope is going to happen. And I think if that happens, if the residents' views and wishes are made public, that's going to hopefully shape this inquiry as something more of the public interest and not just something that's going to protect the state, as it were. So this is one thing we hope.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that, Patrick. If we're seeing that ordinary people, to use that term, are suppressed in their communities, they simply don't know what they're talking about. We're seeing this day after day in relation to the NHS. And I'd just like to say I've been inside the NHS visiting some relatives over the last few days. And the first thing I'm going to say is met some truly wonderful people. A lot of good work going on, very dedicated doctors and nurses, credit where it's due, but very interesting talking to these people, describing how tired they were getting on 12-hour shifts, 12 and a half hours. One of the nurses said that she'd been on shift 4, which I believe is an outrageous length of time. But they were also talking about other problems, so immensely hot wards. Why were the wards stifling with heat? Because they weren't allowed to open the windows because of some supposed health and safety rule. So common sense not allowed in the NHS, and therefore doctors and nurses on the floor couldn't do their job. Well, I picked up this article today, which I found fascinating. This is the chief executive from the National Health Service Improvement organisation. His name, Jim Mackey. And he's been saying this because he's had his cuts policy rebuffed. He said that the final version of plans to make greater savings this year than plans have been cut. So he's saying that NHS must safeguard patient safety and quality, even though they've got these capped expenditure processes in place, the plans. But it says that any cuts that the NHS staff make have got to be consistent with constitutional rights for referral to treatment and patient choice. Now, if you think this is my language that's making the whole thing so difficult, it isn't. This has come out of the report from the NHS Improvement organisation itself, so very convoluted language. What does it mean? I'm going to encourage people to go and have a look at this document, Developing People, Improving Care, a National Framework for Action on Improvement and Leadership Development in NHS-funded services. Now, the only way I could get to grips with this was to take a little video of it, but I would say please go and have a look at it, because you can understand now the web of organisations, not actually on the wards treating sick people, but this is some major management speak here, which is all around leadership. It's all about management systems. It's all about linking talent management to generate better ways of doing things.
And this is why there are more and more billions spent every year and less outcome.
Indeed. Have a look at the people there and what their CVs. We've got a framework. This is page after page of talking about doing the job by people who don't do the job. The nurses and the doctors are on the floor with all of their support staff working immensely hard, long hours. And we have this, it's like something feeding off the back of the NHS. And this is raw management speak, which just goes on and on and on. And this is one document out of tens, hundreds of them. A lot of images. This one will show graphics. When you read it, what does this achieve? Nothing.
Yeah.
Absolute nothing. So if we move on from that, let's have a look at some of the people. We say, well, actually, who's been writing this stuff? Well, very quickly, we find we're into money people. So we've got Jim Mackey himself as the chief executive, NHS Improvement since 2015, chief executive of Northumbria Healthcare, chief operating officer, regional director of finance. These are all money people. And these are the people the government's now put in charge of the NHS. They're putting the screws on. We've got this gentleman here. So if you look through, he's apparently a leader, providing leadership support to NHS trusts. He's not on the ground treating sick people. It's leadership, finance director. And on it goes. I couldn't even get through all of them because there's too much here. But where's this man come from? A qualified chartered accountant, previously worked with KPMG. And if you have a look, he's been involved in mergers and acquisitions. Do you think that might be useful in a privatised NHS, Mike?
Very.
I think so. On it goes. Just more and more people, no real input to the NHS and treating the sick. These are all policy people feeding off the NHS pay packet. We come through to this lady. I found her very interesting because what is her experience? Well, she's working with media groups, and she was the chief operating officer at the BBC.
So what does she know about health?
I've no idea. I couldn't find out from looking at her CV. I've no idea what this woman contributes. And then we get to this level. I found this particularly scary because now we've got a social psychologist specialising in leadership, identity processes, and risk management for the NHS. This is just incredible. So we're going to ask the question, what do these people really cost? What does their organisation cost? And what do they actually do to help the sick and injured? And the answer's got to be zero. Patrick, it is very obvious what's going on here. The NHS is now within a gnat's whisker of being privatised, but the thing is drowning in government-inspired new management speak. This is the transformational agenda. Why isn't the NHS working? Because it's being run by people who have no real qualifications to help sick people. They have no inclination to help sick people. These are professional managers.
Yeah, these are bean counters. And as you rightly pointed out just there, I think Mike pointed out, if you want to privatize the NHS, you need people with experience in mergers and acquisitions. You need people from KPMG. You need people from Price Waterhouse. And I guess, I don't know what the BBC executive will be contributing. Maybe it has to do with those video screens they're going to be putting up in all the waiting rooms, maybe managing the content on those. That's a really important thing, hopefully, in the new privatized NHS. But this is Oliver Letwin's dream come true, the full privatization and breakup of the National Health Service. That seems to be what they're positioning the management team for. It looks like it anyway on the surface if you look at their CVs.
Yeah. Well, we're going to continue to dig into that. And of course, as we've been saying for many weeks now, we've got a lot of interest from people working in the NHS as to what's really going on. Some excellent articles on the UK Column website about the influence of common purpose and leadership within the NHS towards 1 million change agents. And we hope to be bringing together a very experienced group of professionals to talk about the reality of what's happening in the NHS in the autumn. Well, let's just end our news today on the subject of water. A Guardian article, which I just found quite incredible. It says the Bristol refill reuse bottle campaign that's spreading across Europe. And this lady has decided that it's very bad that all these plastic bottles are being discarded. I would agree with her on that. But she's got a cunning plan that we're going to get businesses to sign on to refill people's water bottles. Okay? This is the plan. Now, what's not being asked in the article is why we're paying for water, which is a essentially free resource anyway. We're not asking why these huge global corporations are allowed to make profit from one of a human's key needs. We're not asking why the quality of Maine's drinking water is so poor everybody is rushing to buy bottled water. And we're not mentioning the fact that we were washing and recycling glass bottles 50 years ago.
And of course, when you say we're not, of course we are. It's the Guardian, it isn't.
Well, yes, but I'm throwing out to as wide as possible, Mike. So I'm sure the lady's intentions were right, but is this really what it's all about, that we've got to go running to a business with our little bottle to get it refilled while we've got Nestle making billions of pounds profit off the resource of water? Dangerous times. That's it for today. Patrick, thank you for joining us. We will be back at the same time tomorrow, hopefully with David Scott.
No
David Scott
Alex
tomorrow.
Thompson tomorrow.
Alex Thompson, thank you for that. catching up, as you can see. What I will say is if you're watching UK Column News, you like what we're doing, please subscribe and or donate, because we can only do what we do with your financial support. Thanks very much for joining us. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.